It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Rico Brogna time. How are you all doing? Spring training has finally arrived. Doesn't it feel good? Even if there are no games yet, even if we're not actually all down in Florida, the idea that Clay Holmes is throwing a bullpen session, that Brandon Sproat is throwing 98 miles an hour, that Ryan Stanek is throwing in the bullpen, that the captain, Francisco Lindor, has shown up in Port St. Lucie, Florida. A very depressing place, by the way. It's a beautiful place, but it's very lonely, if you will. Just those thoughts has to pump you up for the start of the baseball season. Now, I'm very excited for this edition of the Rico Brogna because I have been thinking about this episode that we're about to do for months, but I never wanted to talk about it. I never wanted to bring it up. I'd hint at it because until Pete Alonso was re-signed, I didn't want to do a hypothetical. I mean, that's the last thing I want to do is break down a lineup that's fictitious. But now that Alonso is re-signed, now that I am making the assumption, and I am making the assumption that there are no more major transactions to be made with this lineup. For example, like Starling Marte. I don't think they're going to trade Starling Marte. I hope they don't trade Starling Marte despite his age, despite his salary. I want him on this team. I think as a part-time player, as a designated hitter, as overpaid as he'll be, I think he can have a very productive year in a contract year. So now that we know the names and we know the pieces, let's break down the starting lineup. And I preface this by saying that this entire discussion, which I think people love to do, like talking about a starting lineup and arguing about who should bat second and who should bat fourth, we all love it. But I do want to give this warning before we dive in. This discussion is completely meaningless. Now, I hope that doesn't mean you stop the podcast. If you just shut it down and say, well, if it's meaningless, why am I listening? I think we all love to break down lineups, but here's the reality. Last year, the New York Mets had 143 different lineups. And quite frankly, that's not even that big of a number. It feels like that number over the last couple of years, when you look at the Yankees, when you look at the Mets, tends to go to like 150. So 143 different lineups, which sounds like a lot, may not even be that much. The lineup that they used most frequently, 1 through 9, was used 4 times. And by the way, if I gave you that lineup right now, it is completely unrecognizable in terms of what we would see in October and when the Mets turn their season around. So that lineup, the most popular lineup the Mets used, featured Brandon Nimmo leading off. Poor Pete Hoffman is cringing. It featured Starling Marte batting second. It's a lineup that featured Tomas Nido behind the plate and batting ninth, and Brett Beatty was at third base batting eighth. So that lineup, the lineup that was used more frequently than any other lineup, of course, over the course of the regular season, I'm only talking about the regular season, was a lineup that featured a bunch of guys that were off the team, or at least not on the major league roster before things turned around. A lot is going to change. You know, there are going to be slumps. There are going to be guys that get red hot. And so these opinions that I'm about to lay out on my own and the emails I got from people with their opinions on the lineup, the old wrestling line is card subject to change, because it truly is. A lot is going to change. So let's have fun with it, but let's all realize that by the time we're sitting here in the middle of May, we may be talking about completely different things. Now, before we get to the lineup, a couple of news and notes from spring training. Let me start with Francisco Alvarez. Francisco Alvarez did something at spring training on Monday that either you're going to love and you're going to say, that's great, I love him, I can't wait for this season to start, F yeah, or you're going to cringe. So our good buddy, a good friend of the show here on the Rico, Dan, I stopped calling him Negative Dan because, let's erase the negativity. Dan was not happy with what Francisco Alvarez said on Monday of spring training. What Alvarez said was, hey, I think we have the best lineup in Major League Baseball. That's what he said. I think we have the best lineup in Major League Baseball. Now, I may think that. You may think that. But some Met fans don't exactly love a player saying that it reminds them of 2007 and 2008 when the Mets and the Phillies were in the war of words and it ended badly for the Mets. My opinion on this is simple. I like the confidence. I like that Alvarez is coming into spring training with a confidence because, truthfully, when you look at this lineup, and we'll go into details on guys like Francisco Alvarez when we're breaking down where guys should hit, I'd argue Francisco Alvarez is the biggest X factor in this entire lineup because we have an idea what a lot of guys are, and Francisco Alvarez is still a mystery. Francisco Alvarez, since he's come up to the major leagues, and his defense has been really good. His pitch framing has been fantastic. I mean, there are some aspects of his defense he needs to improve, blocking balls in the dirt, maybe not falling too much in love with pitch framing where balls get past him because he's trying to bring that ball in and it turns into a pass ball. But the thing we've seen about his offense is that he is wildly inconsistent. We saw that in his rookie season. We saw that last year. Just to give you an example, in the month of June, when he came back from the injured list, Francisco Alvarez hit 375 with a 1,123 OPS in 16 games and 3 home runs. Pretty good. I mean, we were all like, holy crap, we've missed him a ton. He follows that up in July by hitting 200 with 1 home run and a 578 OPS, continues that in August with a 171 average and a 449 OPS, to where when they were beginning September, I was making the argument on the Rico, play Luis Torrens every day. He's better defensively. Then Alvarez answered the call. He answered the critiques that many had about how he needed to be benched and sat down by hitting a much more respectable 254 and a 900 OPS with 5 home runs and 17 RBIs in 19 games in the month of September. We need that, Francisco Alvarez. So my only trepidation or my only criticism of him saying we have the best lineup in the MLB is go do it. Like, you have to go prove yourself. It's different if Lindor says it. It's different if Soto says it. We're talking about an unproven player. I like Alvarez. I thought he was going to have a huge year last year, and it kind of felt that way, especially in June when he came back from the IL. But as we just explained, he then fell off the rooftop. And that's what happened in his rookie season as well, where he'd go 3 weeks and look like a stud, and then he would hit 175 for another 4 or 5 weeks. So I don't hate that he said it. It's more, go back it up. Go do it now. Now let's get to this lineup. I posted my lineup about 4 days ago on social media, and I went through a lot of the mentions, and most people were angry with my thinking. And my big thought is that I want to hit Pete Alonso second. So let's just get that out of the way, okay? Just throw it out there. I have an unconventional thought, a thought that has been widely ridiculed by my fellow Met fans, and that is, why would you hit Pete Alonso second? So the old adage, or actually it's the new adage in Major League Baseball, is you want your best hitter hitting first, or your best hitter hitting first and second, mainly because they get more plate appearances. And it's simple math, and it makes a lot of sense. On average, the thought is where you bat in the batting order. So batting first as compared to second, as compared to third, you are probably getting about 30 more plate appearances over the course of a season. That's kind of the estimate from one spot to the other. Now, it's not an exact science. It certainly matters your team, your roster. You know, it differs. So it's not an exact science. But in general, that's the thought. If you're batting fifth as compared to fourth, you're going to lose about 30 to 40 plate appearances. So I fully understand that. And I want my best hitters hitting as often as humanly possible. So logic would tell you, well, based on that, how is it not Lindor and Soto 1-2? Now, I think we are going to see a lot of Lindor, Soto 1-2. And there may be a time where I'm going to even say, go Lindor, Soto 1-2. I want to give you my thought on why I'm intrigued by Pete Alonso batting second. So since Pete Alonso was called up in 2019, he has had so many different guys hitting behind him. And I do think that matters. I know there's not an exact stat to prove it one way or the other, but I do think protection matters. I do. I think that Juan Soto last year with Aaron Judge hitting behind him benefited from it. I think that Barry Bonds, when you have an MVP like Jeff Kent hitting behind him, I think he benefits from it. I think that Roger Maris and Mickey Mantle, I'll go back, Lou Gehrig and Babe Ruth, I think there's a benefit to when a great hitter is behind you, you're going to get more fastballs. you're going to get more pitches to hit. So I did a little deep dive because my brain has told me, boy, Pete Alonso's had garbage hitting behind him. Like, who has really hit behind Pete Alonso to give him protection? And, I know he didn't have the greatest year last year. We just did our recent Rico, kind of analyzing the clutchness of his home runs. And I want to thank everybody who would write emails basically saying, this is so flawed. What's wrong with you? I know it's flawed. I admitted that at the beginning. It was more a fun exercise. It put a human touch to the Alonso home runs. There are stats. What is that stat? The win probability added stat, which I think is interesting, but there's no human touch to it. Like, I could sit here and tell you, well, that home run added a WPA of blank percent, and it's just a bunch of numbers. But when you know the situation, you at least on your own can say, oh, that's a really big home run, or it's too early in the game. I don't give a crap. But Pete Alonso's had a very good Met career. He's had some incredible seasons, and he's done it with garbage hitting behind him. Would you like me to prove that? Would you like me to show my work? I will. In 2019, 8 different players protected Pete Alonso. The 8 players are Robinson Cano, Michael Conforto, Brandon Nimmo, Wilson Ramos, Todd Frazier, Dominic Smith, J.D. Davis, and Jeff McNeil. In 2020, and keep in mind, 2020 was a shortened season. How many games did we play that year? 60 games? I try to forget. It escapes my brain, that regular season. They played 60 games. Do you know how many different people protected Pete Alonso in the lineup that year? The answer is 12. That's almost impossible to do. 12 different players protected Pete Alonso in the lineup that year. Who are those guys? Oh, don't worry, I'll tell you. Yoenis Cespedes. That was brief. It didn't last long. Then a bunch of guys who also did it in 2019, Conforto, McNeil, Frazier, Cano, Ramos, Davis, and Smith. And then listen to these 5 names of guys who also protected Pete Alonso in the year 2020. Luis Guillorme, Ahmed Rosario, Jake Marisnik, Andres Jimenez, and Todd Frazier again. Those are the guys that protected Pete Alonso in the lineup in 2020. I know. I'm choking from it. Just thinking about those guys. And when I say Yoenis Cespedes, I want everybody to remember, not the good Yoenis Cespedes, the crappy Yoenis Cespedes who quit in the middle of the season. Those are the guys that protected Pete Alonso in 2020. 12 different guys.
You mean the Yoenis who got attacked by a hog? A wild boar?
That's right. This is the returning Cespedes post-boar. Let's get to 2021. 13 different guys. A bunch of the guys I've already said did it again. J.D. Davis, Tom Smith, Jeff McNeil, Michael Conforto, and Jeff McNeil. How about these new names? Francisco Lindor only did it 3 times. So when I say Lindor, it's not like he's done it often. He protected Pete only 3 times in 2021. The other guys, Kevin Pillar, Tomas Nido. That's right. Tomas Nido protected Pete Alonso that year. Brandon Drury, Billy McKinney, James McCann, Javier Baez, and Jonathan Villar. Yeah. In 2022, 11 different players protected Pete Alonso. A few of those guys who's done it before, like McNeil, Dom Smith, J.D. Davis, Luis Guillorme did it again, and Francisco Lindor, again, only did it 5 times. So the best player that Alonso's played with is Lindor. He only protected him 3 times in 21 and 5 times in 2022. Here are the original names in 2022 that also protected him. Eduardo Escobar, Mark Canha, Daniel Vogelbach, Darren Ruff, Tyler Naquin, and a very young, not good, Mark Vientos. In 2023, 12 guys did it again. Some of the names we've already mentioned, McNeil, Canha, Vogelbach, Vientos, Escobar. Lindor did it 15 times. So we finally got to see a little bit more of Lindor protecting Alonso, but only 15 times. The new guys that protected him, Tommy Pham, Brett Beatty, Starling Marte, Francisco Alvarez, Ronnie Mauricio, and DJ Stewart. Last year, 2024, 11 different guys protected Pete Alonso. Some of them I've mentioned have already done it. McNeil, Alvarez, Beatty, DJ Stewart, Nimmo, Marte, and Vientos. The new guys were Tyrone Taylor, Jesse Winker, Jose Iglesias, and JD Martinez. 38 different players have protected Pete Alonso in the batting order. So I wanted to show my work just to show you that Pete Alonso has had garbage protecting him since he came into the league in 2019. So I apologize. I do. I apologize that I want someone batting second who is not the best hitter on the team, who would get 35, 40 more plate appearances than others, doesn't exactly fit the two-hitter. But here's why I want him batting second, just to start the season. Let's make a deal. Just to start the season. Just a little bit. Give me a little bit. Here's why. Because after all the garbage I just mentioned, do you not want to see Juan Soto protect him? I do. Do you not want to see the amount of good fastballs Pete's going to get? Because God knows no one wants to put him on base ahead of a hit machine like Juan Soto. And how about the other fastballs he'll see from the fact that Francisco Lindor will likely get on base and be a threat to steal second? I think that this is a perfect way to get Pete going to start the season. Is this the long-term answer? Guys, there is no long-term answer with this lineup. We're all going to have different ideas, and I guarantee by the middle of June, it's going to be different. Look at last year. Mendy didn't move Francisco Lindor to that leadoff spot until late May. Think about the amount of times, for those that listen, how we would talk about the lineup, right? Hoff and I, we'd break down the lineup. Nimmo's got to lead off. Then this guy's got a bad second. And then in late May, with the Mets struggling and Lindor struggling, Carlos Mendoza made probably the best move he made as manager, which was that flip of getting Lindor to the leadoff spot. The rest is history. Lindor has an MVP season. So my deal I want to make with the people who vehemently disagree with me about Pete Alonso batting second is, can we just see it? Can we just experiment for just a little bit of time with Pete Alonso going from Daniel Vogelback and Andres Jimenez and Tommy Pham protecting him to one of the best left-hand hitters in all of baseball protecting him in Juan Soto? And that is why, very simple reason, why I want to just see Pete Alonso bat second. I think he can benefit from it greatly. I think he's going to see a selection of pitches he's never seen before. So for everyone who's envisioning Pete, swinging at that 1-2 slider off the plate, and trust me, I have that same nightmare too. Don't you think for a second we may see less of that with Alonso being protected by Juan Soto? Okay? Hoff, you like this at all, or am I crazy? We'll get to a lot of emails. There are a few people who agree with me, but most people think I'm an idiot. Your thoughts on Lindor 1, Alonso 2, and Juan Soto 3?
I don't think you're an idiot. I actually like the way you present it, but I don't think they should do it. I really want to see Soto win that 2-hole. Like, I think he's the guy that I want to have at bat more than anything else. I want Lindor to be the leadoff guy, but Soto to me is much better of a 2-hitter. We saw that last year with the Yankees. Like, it's a natural fit. He's going to get on base, and then from there, the lineup can keep on going.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because Juan Soto did bat second last year. He did put up some massive numbers with the New York Yankees being protected by Aaron Judge, but that was only one season. If you look at Juan Soto's career, Juan Soto statistically is a better 3-hole hitter than he is 2-hole hitter. Again, let me show my work. Batting second, which he did last year with the Yankees, so that certainly aids the numbers quite a bit. He also batted second a lot with San Diego back in 2022. I think it was after they made the trade, but I got to double check. He may have been doing it in Washington, but bottom line was in 2022, he batted second a lot. The amount of plate appearances he's had as a 2-hole hitter is 1661. As a 3-hole hitter, it's 1367. So very similar. Here are the numbers. Batting second, 268. Batting third, 288. So 20-point edge batting third. On-base percentage, 407 batting second. By the way, very good. These are not numbers to sneeze at. 407, my God. But batting third, his on base goes up to 438. His slugging batting second, 483. His slugging batting third, 548. A 986 OPS batting third, 890 batting second. He's hit more home runs as a 3-hitter than as a 2-hitter. Now, I hesitate. I want to give you those numbers. I want people to have those numbers. But I also wonder, like, does it mean anything? I know it's a big sample size, but to me, it matters what the player thinks. Like, does Juan Soto feel more comfortable as a 3-hitter than a 2-hitter? Look, I'm looking at his breakdowns year to year. In 2021, for whatever reason, when he batted second, he had bad numbers. He had a 760 OPS. That's not good for any. That's not good for Juan Soto. In 2022, the other year where he did it a lot, his numbers were okay. They were not nearly as good as they were last year. He had 248 with an 840 OPS. Then obviously last year, he put up those massive numbers. When he's batted third, which again, he didn't do last year at all. He had 0 games batting third. He did it in 2023, and he put up a 982 OPS. In 2021, he put up a 1,072 OPS batting in the number 3 hole. So I don't know if there's a comfort level, and I'm ignoring him batting fourth and fifth because it's not an option. That's not even something we would consider. I wouldn't care less what his numbers are batting fourth or fifth. He also had 2 games leading off, by the way. Just want to point that out. Not that that's an option either. So there is a statistical difference between him batting second and third. And again, considering last year he batted second the entire year and had one of the best years of his career, it shows you that there was a huge difference between, I guess, his comfort batting third and batting second. I don't know what Juan Soto has said he prefers, but the stats have at least shown you throughout his major league career, he's a better third place hitter than he is second place hitter.
I mean, listen, last year was significant. Even though the numbers were great, you could see that Aaron Judge batting behind him
100%.
definitely helped. Yeah. There's no other lineup that he's had batting second, third, fourth, fifth, whatever it is, with Aaron Judge batting there. So I can understand also the level of why they would put him there at the number 2 spot, because you're Judge driving in runs. Now, if you think, you clearly do, that the 3 spot is better for him, don't you want to have somebody that's going to automatically get on base in front of him too?
Well, yeah, I want as many guys on base in front of Juan Soto as humanly possible. So now you think to yourself, okay, you're obviously not going to suggest Brandon Nimmo, considering you hate him for whatever reason. Nimmo had a weird year last year. Like, his on base was down, and it's been down the last couple of years, but he had a great start to the year. Like, we can't ignore that. He was an all-star in the first half of the year, and maybe it was the plantar fasciitis is what he had. I'm trying to remember the foot injury that he had. Maybe that affected him, but you're certainly not suggesting Nimmo batting second. So if you want high on base in the 2 hole, and Pete's certainly not that, who are you suggesting?
If it's gonna be somebody, it's weird, because now I want to start changing my lineup around. If that's the case, if this is a scenario, who's going to give me a good at bat? It could be Starling Marte, though we've seen him in the past.
You can't bat him second. What are you, nuts?
Well, you're trying to stretch out the lineup. You're trying to stretch the lineup out. No. That's for sure. No, you're not trying to stretch it out at all?
No, I'm trying to stretch out the lineup. I just don't think Starling Marte is anywhere close to being a 2-hole hitter on this team. It's not even, I wouldn't even consider it. It would not even be something I would put through my head. And like Mark Vientos, I've thought about, but again, if you're looking to get on base, if you're looking for walks, if that's what you're thinking about ahead of Soto, I don't think Vientos supplies that. I also think it puts a lot of pressure on him after a really good rookie year to throw him into that 2-hole. I think if it's not going to be Soto, and look, I think the majority of people want it to be Soto, which I totally understand. I get it. In this day and age, he's like the perfect number 2 hitter. But I think the only other option is Brandon Nimmo, Pete Alonso, or Mark Vientos. That's the way it is, because I don't think there's anybody else that should break through that top 5. Like, to me, the top 5 is pretty much set. It's just determining the order, which is Lindor, Soto, Alonso, Vientos, and Nimmo. Maybe there's a tough lefty on the mound and Nimmo drops a couple of slots, but for the most part, you can't break that top 5. And Soto and Lindor are your top two hitters, or they're batting 2 of 3 if you want to hit Soto third, like I suggested. And the only other candidates to me are Alonso, Vientos, and Nemo. Starling Marte is a non-starter for me. I'm sorry.
I see. Here's the thing is, right? Like I'm throwing it out there because I was originally going to go Soto too. Vientos to me is a guy that you could plug in at the third spot. Like I think that's where I want Vientos to be because I feel like he can rebound off of not rebound, but I need to see him have a great season, and I think that's the best place to put him. Not put him in a pressure spot as a cleanup hitter.
I would hate to have Pete. Now, I was looking at Alonso's breakdowns on where he's hit. He's hit cleanup far and away more than any other spot in the batting order. He has started 509 games batting cleanup, 150 as a third place hitter, 133 as a second place hitter, and then not many games batting fifth and sixth. So obviously Pete is used to hitting cleanup. But if Pete bats cleanup, you're looking at Brandon Nimmo protecting him. And so it kind of goes back to what I just laid out, that he hasn't had a lot of protection. And at least to start, I would just be fascinated to see how he does getting real protection. By the way, the stat breakdown, you guys are going to love this. It's not like it's not like I'm cooking these stats. I'm just reading them. Pete Alonso's best numbers are batting second. It is what it is. Now, last year he batted second 24 times. He hit 232 with 5 home runs and a 764 OPS. But as a rookie in 2019, that's where he did most of his damage. He started 70 games batting second, had a 1,000 OPS, and hit 26 home runs in the 70 starts batting second. So overall, his numbers as a two-place hitter, 264 average, highest batting average he has in any spot in the order, and a 905 OPS, highest OPS he has in any other spot in the batting order. And then cleanup is obviously where he's done most of his work. And that's where I think he may end up. Though if it's not going to be Soto 3, if I lose out on this argument and it's Lindor, Soto 1-2, I'd want Pete batting 3, at least at first. I'd put him ahead of Mark Vientos because, like I mentioned, I want to see him having that real protection. And if it's not Soto, Mark Vientos ain't bad. So to me, the lineup I lined up to start this season, the lineup that I would give it, I'd roll out there to start this season would be leading off shortstop Francisco Lindor, batting second, first baseman Pete Alonso, batting third, right fielder Juan Soto, batting cleanup third baseman Mark Vientos, batting fifth, left fielder Brandon Nimmo. I'd platoon Winker and Marte in the 6 hole at DH, Jeff McNeil batting 7th, Francisco Alvarez batting 8th, and I'd have Tyrone Taylor, Jose Siri batting 9th and center. I'll tell you why, just to go to the bottom of the order, why I'm intrigued by Siri and Taylor. You get a little bit of pop out of Jose Siri. They could steal like a handful of bags. They're not real stolen base threats, but they can steal a bag. I like that in the 9 hole because the 9 hole is turning the lineup around. And so I love a guy who has a high on base. Now, obviously, Taylor and Siri don't exactly have that, but I don't think you have a lot of real good options there. I mean, you're not dropping Nimmo to 9th as much as Hoffman fantasizes about that. You're not hitting Winker or Marte 9. Alvarez certainly doesn't do any of that. Jeff McNeil, I've been intrigued by McNeil in the 9 hole. McNeil's best numbers, by the way, throughout his career are as an 8th place hitter. That's where he started to hit last year before he got hurt. So that's how I would line it up 1 through 9. And then I was reading my mentions after I posted that the other night. Constance. Soto's got him at second. Our buddy Joe DeMayo does a great job with the Met Pod. First thing he says is, Pete isn't a 2-hitter. You got to start with Lindor and Soto. What makes a 2-hitter? That's my rhetorical question, not just for Joe, but for everybody. Like, what is in 2025? What's a 2-hitter? I know what a 2-hitter was when I was growing up, but I think we're all past that, right? High contact, goes the other way, can lay down a bunt, little bit of speed. Obviously, that description is not Pete Alonso. That description is also not Juan Soto for the most part. Like, the old school 2-place hitter is gone. So what is the 2-hitter? Is it just simply the best hitter on your team? If that's the case, then sure, it's Juan Soto. But Pete Alonso is capable, as we've seen throughout his career, of being an 850 OPS guy, of being someone who could hit 45 home runs. Isn't that kind of what a 2-place hitter is right now? A guy who hits a lot of home runs? a guy who can get on base. Pete's not a huge on base guy, but he's a good hitter. He's a very good hitter. And who are the Mets' best hitters on this team? I think we all agree Soto is one. Last year, it certainly was Francisco Lindor. And then if you look at Pete's resume, and if you believe that with proper protection, he can get back to being the guy he was in 21 or 22, then Pete Alonso is their third best hitter. You could even argue he's their second best hitter. So I don't know what makes a two-hitter. So when I hear that, like Pete isn't a two-hitter, what is a two-hitter? What is it? But I do think this is a very deep lineup. This lineup excites me. That lineup we just laid out, and obviously there are going to be differences on how we line it up, but 1 through 5, and then you get to Winker, Marte, and then you're looking at Alvarez and McNeil at 7 and 8. That is a tremendous lineup. Oh, one other thing we should not overthink when it comes to this lineup. Let's say Brandon Nimmo's batting 5th, okay? I'm not afraid of hitting Jesse Winker 6. I know there's this appeal of you got to split up the lefties. Let me tell you why I don't give a rat's ass about splitting up the lefties. Winker's not facing a lefty. So late in the game, if there is a left-handed reliever, let's say it's the Subway Series, and old Timmy Hill comes into the game to face Nimmo and Winker, because that's the lane Aaron Boone wants to use him in. Does anybody in their right mind think Jesse Winker's getting that at bat? He's not getting that at bat. Marte's going to pinch hit. I think this is could be a straight platoon at DH. And let's not forget Ronnie Mauricio. If Ronnie Mauricio can prove he's healthy and hit a little bit, I can see him possibly blossoming into the DH on this team as well. Switch hitter, a lot of pop. I think Ronnie Mauricio is a major possibility for the DH spot. So that's how I would line it up. Now that you've got Marte batting second out of your head, how would you line it up?
All right, so this is what I had before you screwed me up with the whole Soto batting third thing.
That's just my opinion. You don't have to have him batting third.
Well, that's why I didn't. All right, so it's simple. All right, here we go. I'm going to screw up some things here and there, but obviously, I think Francisco Lindor, by the way, and I've heard a lot of people, he's not a real leadoff hitter. I mean, what else would you want out of a leadoff hitter? He got on base. He stole bases. He had some power. I mean, he gave you a little bit of everything. Francisco Lindor is the perfect leadoff hitter. When you had Brandon Nimmo lead off for the past few years, the one thing he didn't do was steal bases. I know now he is, but I think that Lindor proved last year, especially once he actually started to hit the ball, it was after he went to the one to lead off the game. So,
and remember, Hoff, he had success in Cleveland as a leadoff hitter too. Like he's been a very good leadoff hitter throughout his career. So at least to start, hopefully he doesn't get off to another one of those horrible starts. But at least to start, I agree. I think it's a no-brainer that Lindor's got to be the leadoff hitter to begin the season.
Then I'm going to Juan Soto because I do think that he needs as many at-bats as possible, and you get Lindor on, and then you have the possibility of Soto driving him in already in the first inning, whether it's a base hit, whether he walks, whatever the case is, and that sets up for either 2 men on and Mark Vientos hitting a bomb, or Mark Vientos just scaring of the pitcher and then setting up Pete Alonso with the 4-hole. Now, here's where I disagree with you. I do think Marte and Winker batting 5th is really good because, like you said, it's going to be a platoon. When is Starling Marte going to bat against the righty? He's not. And his splits last year with, I know it's only 100 at-bats, but still, I think his OPS was 844. His on-base was
mashed lefties.
Yeah. So, that's a perfect spot to be behind Alonso to give him a little protection. And then not for nothing, but Winker, I mean, all his numbers came from hitting against righties. So you're right. I think that's a great platoon. But why be afraid of putting them 6th or 7th? Make them go behind Pete. I think that's perfect. And this is where, I'll shock you, Brandon Nimmo 6th. I know it's not higher in the batting order, but I think it's a good spot. He can reset the lineup. And then you could put in Francisco Alvarez. You could put in your Jose Siri and Tyrone Taylor. And then to restart the lineup, because I kind of wanted Nimmo there, but instead I'll give Jeff McNeil a spot. Maybe he can find something to restart the batting order.
Yeah, I like, and I started to feel this way even in the latter part of the pitcher hitting. I started to fall in love with, I don't want the pitcher batting 9th anymore. I want him hitting 8th. I even toyed with the idea of hitting him 7th because I think it's important to have guys that can get on base in front of your best hitters, especially when nowadays your 2 or 3 best hitters are hitting 1, 2, 3. Well, the guy who's batting 8th and 9th, they matter. You come up to start the 6th inning and it's 8, 9, and 1 in the batting order. You want them to table set for the top of your order. So
the one thing I will say, and it's weird because we talked about Francisco Alvarez, like, maybe he's 6, 7, 8, or whatever it is. I think the one thing he can't do is he can't be batting in front of Jose Siri, because if I'm correct, Siri's got a lot of speed. So Alvarez is not a fast guy. So if you do get him on base, you're going to kind of a log jam right there. So maybe you have to switch those two.
Yeah, Siri stole 15 bases last year. Let's get to some of your emails, some thoughts on this lineup. David from Charlotte, North Carolina writes, I hope this email finds you in good spirits. I'm in very good spirits. Thank you. After finding out our guy Pete Alonso has come home for another 162, I've been listening to the podcast for years now, traveling between sites during my workday, and I wanted to weigh in on the who bats second debate. I could tell by how you brought this up on the day of the Rico that you had some interesting ideas, and something tells me we may have a similar wavelength on this. Here's the way I would set this lineup up, at least at the beginning of the season. Obviously, if players don't perform as expected, changes would happen. Number 1, Francisco Lindor. This is obvious. Don't fix something that isn't broken. Number 2, Brandon Nimmo. I know people may think this is crazy, so let me explain. I believe it at the core. Nimmo is a contact hitter who knows how to get on base, and that is exactly why we want him here. Hitting in between Lindor and Soto will ensure Nimmo gets good pitches to swing at. When good hitters get quality pitches, great things can happen. We may not have seen the best yet of Brandon Nimmo. Let me just respond to that. He strikes out a lot, so I wouldn't say he's a great contact hitter. He is the kind of guy, though, that if he can get back to being Brandon Nimmo and get on base close to 40% of the time, which is not nuts, the idea of 2 guys being on for Juan Soto a lot is very appealing. I think Brandon Nimmo's got to reprove himself. Now, you could say the same thing about Pete Alonso. I totally get it. But I think if Nimmo can get back to being that high on-base guy, which dipped in the second half of last year, it's not the craziest idea in the world, even if I don't like it to start. Number 3, Juan Soto. The 3-hole is where you put your best all-around hitter, and with Lindor and Nimmo both capable of getting on base at 40% of the time, while also both being fast, makes this another no-brainer. I don't think your best hitter bats third anymore. I don't think that's the way it is. Your best hitter now bats second, which is the pushback on the Soto batting third. Batting cleanup, Polar Bear Pete. He's back to be protection for Juan Soto. He's also the prototypical power hitter hitting behind Soto, and before Vientos will give Pete more strikes to swing at. Mark Vientos 5th, our rising star. Pete finally gets the protection in the lineup he deserves. Speaking my language. I want Pete to get protection. I'd love to see Soto do it first, but I get it. Vientos could certainly supply that. Number 6, Winker Marte. Feels like the right place to put these 2 veteran guys. They can be the bridge between youngsters and even share jokes or input on the pitchers to the younger hitters via the on-deck circle. Even more so when a fresh inning is starting. Look at that. I didn't even think about the jokes. Batting 7th, Francisco Alvarez. In the 7th spot, Alvy would have less pressure and really give himself space to grow. This is the prove-it spot in the lineup. Number 8, Jeff McNeil. McNeil, the infamous 8 spot, the inning extender. Got to clear that 9 spot, and McNeil gives you a good chance to do that. Number 9, Jose Siri. Yeah, I mean, we're on a kind of a similar wavelength with that. My one difference would be I'm not ready to bat Brandon Nimmo second to start the season.
I have a question for you, because this is the one thing about Brandon Nimmo where a lot of people said, like, he's changed his approach at the plate, which is why, whether it's the team has asked him to hit for more power or whatever the case is. But is that the difference? Is it that they've specifically asked him to change his style at the plate?
I mean, maybe. He certainly has supplied it. And we also saw him much more aggressive on the base paths last year, which I know you enjoyed, because he was finally stealing some bases. Brandon Nimmo went from a guy that would absolutely never, ever, ever run to all of a sudden stealing, 15 bases, which was at least a respectable number considering he was stealing 3 bases the year before that. I think that there clearly has been a change of approach with Brandon because he's just much more of a power hitter now. I mean, he hits for pop. And I think if, depending on where he is in this batting order, he may get a ton of RBI opportunities. He drove in 90 runs last year, which for Brandon was such a massive number considering his career high was 68. So he's become more of a slugger and dangerous hitter in terms of extra base hits over the last couple of years. I think the negative is his on-base percentage has dropped 5 years in a row. Think about that for a second. He was at a 401 clip in 2021. He also hit 292. Then he drops to 367. His average dropped, but it was still good. He hit 274. It goes from 401 to 367 to 363, and then last year all the way down with 327 clip, despite driving all those runs in. And his batting average also dipped. It dipped 50 points last year. And you try to figure out why. Well, his strikeout numbers were up considerably. He struck out 23% of the time, which is higher than the league average, and was up over what he had been doing the last couple of years. And yeah, I mean, he's pulling the ball a hell of a lot more. So when your pull percentage is up, I guess you're just assuming, yeah, he's trying to jack it, trying to hit the ball over the fence, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I just want to see his on-base percentage get back up there. 340 for Brandon. No, Brandon Nimmo's got to be 380, 390. That's what I want to see from Brandon this year. And hopefully he's healthy because, look, maybe the reason why he dipped as much as he did last year was because he was not a healthy baseball player. Maybe that's what contributed to it. This is from, oh man, I forgot to write the person's name down. I always apologize for that. You send an email to the ricob@gmail.com. You want some name recognition. I apologize. So let's just call this person Bob. Bob writes, okay, Evan, now I see why you were so excited to have lineup talks because you had Pete Alonso batting before Juan Soto in mind and you knew it would spur a conversation. Well played, sir. I can promise you this before I read the rest of the email. I wasn't doing it to spur a conversation or have people yell at me or, this is a horrible idea. I just have been, over the last 7 years with Pete here, I've been waiting for the day where he can get real protection. And look, you could argue Mark Vientos like one of our recent emailers, but I just want to see it. Can you give me a month? Just 1 month of Pete Alonso batting ahead of Juan Soto. That's all I ask. Anyhow. With that being said, Evan, you're wrong. Pete's role is to drive in guys and hit bombs. That's his role, right? It'd be nice if he's a better overall hitter or became a better on-base guy, but his role is to hit 100 RBIs and over 30 home runs, not be a better overall hitter. You could argue he's the best hitter at driving runners in. So it makes sense if the two best hitters in the lineup, one being an over 400% on-base guy, bats ahead of him. That's the best spot for your RBI and home run guys. I understand Soto is also great at driving runs in, but Soto's number one strength is getting on base. It makes the most sense constructing this lineup to get the most out of everybody's strengths, right? You think they'll score more runs with Soto behind Pete? They won't, because when Pete drives in runs, the guy in front of him will be on base 40% of the time. That's why it's best to hit Soto before Pete Alonso. Anthony writes, I'm not sure which idea is more ridiculous. Pete Alonso batting second or Brandon Nimmo batting ninth. Soto bats second until his on-base percentage dips below 350. Lindor leads off. Your best hitters need to get the most at-bats. Alonso returns. He bats fourth or fifth. Well, how about third? Can we at least go there? Like, if you want to go Lindor 1, Soto 2, because they are the Mets' two best hitters, how about Pete number 3, Vientos 4, Nimmo 5? Can we at least agree to that? Is that fair? This email from Dave writes, Evan, I saw your post on X with your vision of the Mets lineup. You have Pete Alonso in the 2 spot. I could not agree more. How about that? Got a rare agreeer. Too many fans think Soto needs Alonso to protect him, but in truth, Alonso is not a protection kind of bat. He's just not good enough to be the protection. Lindor leading off as a hitter that will walk, hit for average, and hit for power is ideal. Lindor also doesn't need protection from the guy behind him, which leads to Alonso being great in the 2-hole. Can you imagine all the times Lindor's on base for Alonso and pitchers are forced to pitch to Pete with Soto in the 3-hole, giving Alonso protection? Alonso will see better pitches, and Soto will have countless RBI opportunities. With those three guys at the top of the order, Vientos will have the opportunity to rake with Nimmo behind him as his protection. Regardless of Nimmo's overall average last season, he was and always been a very high on-base guy with a beast with runners in scoring position. It just makes too much sense to stack the top five as you have it. I'm feeling the excitement for the season to start. Hopefully the momentum doesn't cease and we can I see what he's doing here. He's doing a nameplate. Let me read this again so we can get the full effect of what they wrote.
Ooh, okay.
I'm finally feeling the excitement for the season to start. Hopefully the momentum doesn't cease and we can get ourselves a frontline starter. Let's go Mets. You see what he did there?
I see what you did there, Mikey.
Little cease action.
I have a question for you. Do you remember how many different variations the Mets had of the lineup last year? Do you remember that total? Do we have that number?
I said it at the beginning of the pod. I forgot now. I think it was 144 different lineups.
So how many do you think that they're going to do? So the fact that you're saying give Pete like at least, 30 games or whatever it is, he might get 30 games at number 2 because they're just going to switch things around as much as possible.
I'll make you this prediction. I don't think, it's funny about Carlos Mendoza. He didn't switch the lineup a lot for the sake of switching the lineup a lot. Early in the season, the team obviously really struggled, and he was looking for the connection that worked. He was looking to find that right lineup that made sense for this team. And in late May or mid-May, when he finally made that switch to Francisco Lindor in the leadoff spot, he stuck with that. Like once Lindor went to the leadoff spot, that was it. That was his, all right, we're going to work it. He also had Pete Alonso in the 2-hole. And remember, he went to Alonso in the 2-hole a little bit before he went to Lindor in the leadoff spot. And so for a while, he tried out Lindor, Alonso, Nimmo, JD. That was the 4 guys. And he stuck with that until he realized, all right, this isn't working with Pete. And he moved Pete to the cleanup spot and Nimmo to the 2-hole. And then we had Lindor, Nimmo, JD, and Pete for a very long time. Then Vientos was just too good. And so they moved Vientos to the 3 spot, and JD Martinez got dropped. And so late in the season, before Lindor got hurt, the lineup we mostly saw was Lindor, Nimmo, Vientos, Alonso, and Jesse Winker. And that's kind of what it turned into. So none of that was Mendy just saying, I got to change the lineup. That was, I got to find the right combo. And obviously Mark Vientos having the year he had is what forced a lot of changes. I mean, Mark Vientos wasn't even in the major leagues to begin this season. Mark Vientos hit the game-winning home run against the Cardinals. They send his ass down, which still bothers me. Then he finally comes back. And then by the end of the season, he's batting 3rd, which shows you Mendy is amenable to change based on performance. So how many different lineups are they going to have? I mean, I think the Mets have some really good hitters where if guys perform and guys aren't getting off to historically bad starts and not facing a lot of injuries, that he may find that fit that works and not alter it very much. Like there's a chance Lindor is going to go wire to wire as the leadoff hitter. Juan Soto went wire to wire last year as the 2-place hitter for the New York Yankees. So how many lineups are they going to have? I don't know. All I know is last year they had 143 different lineups. So I'm going to go with, and by the way, I don't think that number, as high as it sounds, is as high as you think it is. In fact, how many lineups do you think they had in 2023? A year earlier, with Buck Showalter as the manager, they had 143 different lineups with Mendy. How many did they have a year before? My point was not proven, by the way, so don't worry.
I would think that
sometimes you think I'm setting it up to say, see? No. My point was not proven successfully here, but go ahead.
I mean, listen, there's 162 games. I think that he probably did the lineup like 100 times, maybe 100 different lineups.
So 143 different lineups in 2024, 138 lineups in 2023. So Buck Showalter had fewer lineups and different combinations in 2023. I would have guessed differently, by the way. That's why I said, I thought it was going to be 150 or something like that.
I mean, but there's 162. There's 162 games. You can have a different lineup every day.
Yeah. 2022, the number's even lower. It's down to 132. So, yeah, the Mets had more lineups in – and I'm not going back further, and the reason I'm not is because then you're including the pitcher, and I think that's stupid.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's going to cause a lot of different changes. But, yeah, 143 different lineups last year, 138 the year before, 133 the year before that with Buck Showalter.
That's crazy. Again,
I'm going to say 135 different lineups this year. That's my prediction.
We do it over. That's going to be in the over-unders.
Yes. It should be.
Listen, I mean, you think about, though, the one thing I will say is that between the injuries and people get like, Stearns cutting people, Joey Wendell, Zach Short. So, yeah, I guess those people getting replaced, they're in the lineup for so long and then they're gone. So, I mean, it is what happens.
And injuries. I mean, that's the thing that scares you are injuries. Like, I'm nervous about two things as we begin spring training. And obviously, any disagreements, I'm sure there'll be plenty. You can email us to ricob@gmail.com. Starting soon, we're going to start to be very interactive with you. We're going to have a Rico Rumble where we will allow a lot of our listeners to come on and just argue with us so that we can get debate. So if you have strong disagreements on this starting lineup, maybe on the next edition of the Rico, we'll give you 5 minutes. We'll have a Rico Rumble. We'll argue with each other. Respectfully, of course. I mean, not going to call each other names or anything like that. But there are two things that scare me as we begin spring training. I want to be real about what I'm scared about. Number one, Brandon Nimmo. I'm nervous about Brandon Nimmo. I want to see him healthy. One thing we're used to over the last couple of years, he's probably not going to play a lot of spring training games to start. We can't fret over that. But I want Brandon to be healthy. So let's keep an eye on him. And hopefully when this season starts in Houston in a month and a half, Nimmo's good to go and he doesn't start the year on the injured list. But my other concern is, can they get to the start of the season? And I'm more concerned with the pitching than I am with the position players as a whole because I think they have some interesting depth. Can they get to the start of this season without major injuries on their pitching staff? Last year, around this time, it was early, man. It was early in camp. We got the Kodai Senga scare. And that was brutal. That was absolutely brutal. Think about how we felt a year ago when we got that news on Kodai Senga. So can the Mets get through these bullpen sessions, the start of games, which is only in a week and a half, which is crazy to think about, without major injury? And I'm talking about Kodai Senga. Now, the biggest worry about Kodai Senga is, can he be healthy for a full season? He had a great rookie year. He spoiled us. And then last year was such a lost year. I don't even include what happened in the postseason. He basically had a lost season outside of the 5 1/3 innings he threw against the Braves on that Friday night. So fingers crossed on health. That's the most important thing going into spring training because the Mets don't have, and we're going to break this down on the next Rico, they don't have a lot of spring battles. We're going to project the 26-man roster. And I was jotting it down the other day, and I realized the biggest issue with projecting the 26 is projecting that everybody's healthy. If everybody's healthy, I think it's pretty straightforward. But as we start spring training, there are going to be injuries, and you just keep your fingers crossed that it's nothing major. We do appreciate you listening, checking out the Rico Brogna. You can always download the podcast wherever you download your podcast and rate, review, and subscribe and all that good stuff. We appreciate you listening. Any feedback you want to give us, the ricob@gmail.com is the email address, the ricob@gmail.com. Thank you very much for listening to another edition of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.